This is just a short prelude to this video. It's a very long video and I'm indexing it below in the description, so you click on more and you can go to the various parts of it. I was asked to go to Jersey to help them because they had a very mixed up sort of proposal to build a huge wind farm, 5 or 6 times more than what they could ever use outside, and maybe import some of it into the island, maybe not, all sorts of vague things. But what was coming out in the official report was simply written by idiots. I'm not going to mince my words here. Ridiculous. And basically the problem was this. They think they can, as I understand it, they can now use this to make a lot of money. Well, all they can get is the seabed lease because they own the seabed. So they can get the seabed lease for the wind farm. Now, what you'd normally do in that is a wind farm developer would pay the lease and they'd first of all reserve it with a fee, a non-refundable fee, and then develop it within a certain time, like 5 years. That's the norm. But it's the wind farm developer who does the development and then sells it to whoever, in this case, probably nearly all of it or all of it to France. So if you're going to go about this, you get the wind farm developer to say, look, I've got a seabed lease, come and have a look at it, do a feasibility study, see whether you want to lease it. That's fine. But oh no, what you're going to see is a confrontation with one of their ministers and myself in this talk. But you'll also see a number of things covered, like how a gas station is 28 times cheaper to put up than a wind farm, and how after you've put it up, the wind is 3 or 4 times more expensive. You'll see all that detail. So I may intervene as I go through this video. It's a very long video, the longest ever I've done, and hence I will be doing the indexing below. And don't forget, when it first goes on YouTube, the indexing doesn't work until it's played the whole thing through. So there we are. So here we are. It's good because you'll see the interactions with people contesting what I'm saying. People, not agreeing and people agreeing. And so I think it's great to see whether people who understand what's going on. Now, this is not to do with CO2. This is simply to do with the technology of wind farms. And by the way, if people often claim because I'm not a pure climate scientist, as it were, I can't talk about the CO2. Well, in that case, they can't talk about the engineering, can they? And in the truth, it all spans the whole thing. So I don't preclude anyone from talking about anything because all I go on is evidence and not personal attacks. So there we are. This is the prelude to the video. It's a big one, so the bookmarks are there so you can return to it where you were, or you can go to a particular subject. Or having watched it, if you want to go over a subject again, go to the index, go to the subject and just watch that little part. Okay, well, thank you for coming. Here's the video.
Just while Paul's setting up, I'll give you some background. Paul's a retired chartered environmental engineer and water resource enhancer. He's been concerned with some of the issues that's going on in areas of climate and energy, and has given a number of presentations and talks to the United Kingdom and other areas. So he's fairly well known, and if you get on the internet, you'd certainly see his work. He's got over 200 videos of interviews and talks. And so we're very pleased that he took some time out of his personal life to come and share his observations. And there will be a chance to question him and stuff. So I think this is very important, and thank you, Paul. Okay.
I want to be grilled by you on this because I'm going to make some fairly blatant statements. Yeah. When I was invited here, it was a gradual discovery of what you were proposing. And as I discovered more, I became more astonished at what you were proposing. So I want to back up what you said, Kirsten. I want to say this is all about economics. It's not about CO2. It's about the best economic solution for Jersey. I totally agree with that. And the next thing I agree with is evidence-based. Okay, so I want truth. Well, I want that. I want you to grill me. Okay, so I make that clear. And also want you to relax, because I'm not going to use too much jargon. I'm going to speak to everybody. I'm going to speak and explain technical things to everybody. Okay? So you don't need any prior knowledge. If at any point I use any buzzwords or phrases you don't understand, stop me. I'll explain them. Just so you know, this is my perspective, and you may not agree with it. I'm not fighting a rational cause here. I'm fighting a cult. I give my time freely and have no skin in this game. I'm retired. And because I'm 80 and retired, I've reached the point where I don't care what people think. Right? I really don't. You know, the only people that care about me, really, what I think, is my grandchildren who don't like to walk with me sometimes. The thing is, you know, they get embarrassed by their own parents, mind you. I subsidise my own work. I don't make any money. It actually costs me to do my work. And there is simply no rationale behind this wind farm proposal, so I'm obviously going to be directly opposed. But in any discussion, I want to say this, and this is what I would teach every child. Science and technology has no appeal to authority. You shouldn't have appeal to authority counting. So if I say this Nobel Prize winner says this, that's meaningless. But if I say this Nobel Prize winner produced this evidence, that's relative, that's important. Right? It's called appeals to authority. It's used all the time to hide behind. So I don't accept anyone doing that. And the next thing is consensus. There's no place in science. It's a political term. And if you went on consensus, I'll give you two quick examples. One is an ordinary clerk in an office came up with a great idea, in physics this was, and the whole world turned on him. 100 professors wrote in and said he's mad. They even wrote a book against him, yes, because he's a clerk in an office. His name was Einstein, by the way, and he was right. And only 3 or 4 years ago, we just had the entire world of astrophysics turned upside down by the James Webb Telescope, because the galaxies are there much earlier than they can be. Yes, the entire world. So they rushed off to a professor, the media did. And I'm on television a lot, I meet a lot of media people and things like that. And they're just after the glory stories, as it were. So they rush off to the press and say, you must be devastated, you're almost retiring, your whole world of astrophysics is gone. And he said, not at all. Not at all. Even though I'm about to retire, that's the most exciting time, because now we realise we're wrong. Yeah, we have to solve it, and that's exciting, and that's a scientist. Okay, so and unless the science or the technology is verified by observation, no matter how clever you are, no matter how smart you are, if it doesn't work in the real world, it's right, you're wrong. So those are the 3 fundamental principles I wish were taught in schools, right? So let's get on with the actual thing. Now, I am all about, then this is not about CO2 today. It's not about that science. It's purely about, really about economics and technology today. But this is how I feel. This is what it's like. People try to name you. They can call you these days a racist. They can call you far right. They can call you this. They can call you that. I'm fed up with a society that does this. And all I appeal for is the evidence. And this is what my talk's about, evidence. So what the proposal is, 1,000 megawatt wind farm, which claims, and I'm using their figures, 3796 gigawatt hours, that's the amount of energy coming out. By the way, a megawatt is the rate of energy. So when you buy electricity at home, you don't buy a kilowatt, you buy a kilowatt hour. That's an amount. That's a rate of 1 kilowatt flowing for an hour. Okay, roughly 5 to 6 times your current needs, but at times 12 times more. I'll explain that. You buy every kilowatt. Now, let me explain this. The whole wind farm industry is built on a model. And the model it's built on is when they put it in, you buy every single kilowatt hour they can produce, even if you don't want it. It's called constraint payments. Some farms in the UK are paid 51% of the time to switch off. Okay? And that's very important to understand. Nobody builds a wind farm without a customer who will subsidise it. And I don't believe you can afford, well, I know you can't afford as an island to subsidise. You've got to make money, as Kirsten says. You've got to make the money. And if it's France, you'll still be 95% reliance on France, because that's when the wind stops. You can have 12 days when the wind's below 10 miles an hour and the wind farm produces nothing. Nothing at all. And you've got to turn to France then for all of it. For all of it. But lots of days it's not producing enough, or it's producing too much. When it's producing too much, you've got to pay for it regardless of whether you use it or not. So would you approach France and tell them this is the next best thing to develop, next best place to develop a wind farm, and get between them and the developer? I'll explain more of that in a minute. Then there's a matter of convincing a developer, because this wind farm, now, have any of you heard how much it's going to cost to build? Have any of you heard that? And in Guernsey, they had a year's working party on it. It's over 4 billion. 4,000 million pounds. And I'll give you the evidence for that in a second. Yes? And the return that was talked about by Kirsten, I actually agreed with what he said, but was 200 million, which is 5% return. Yeah? And that is taking away the vast majority of the wind farm developers' profits. No, but it's actually 40 times larger than the Isle of Man proposal, which I've been dealing with. 40 times larger than that. And it comes at a very high risk, which I'll be going into. All the time producing evidence. Stop me at any time, but there'll be times when I say questions as well after each section. I don't expect you to remember everything I've said. Okay, so I based this costing on the St. Bruick. I think that's how you pronounce it, I don't know. Based on St. Bruick Wind Farm, it's public, 2.04 billion, that one. It finished last May. So the best place for me to give an estimate of the cost, twice the size, by the way, of Bruick, right, would be 4.08 billion. Okay? That would be £83,265 for every home in Jersey. That's assuming 3 people to a home. It'd be £3,746 interest per home per annum. And it would add, in interest charges alone, 5 pence per kilowatt hour to the cost of the production. Right, 5 pence. So the 6p they're talking about has immediately become 11p. You've got to get the return on the capital. No one will build something unless having borrowed the 4 billion. Right? And what amazes me is I'm coming here and the public are not being told how much it's going to cost. Right? Facts. So you approach a wind farm developer and explain it's not for you but for France, and they'll be the customer and pay back this investment. Then answer the obvious question on what France has to say. And this goes back to the opening remark by Graham. You've got to have the customer. It's customer driven. In the UK, we say this is the area of the seabed, and you can make money out of seabed, no doubt at all. Right? This is the area. Now auction. Let's have an auction and bid who's going to go in. Right? That's got a problem these days because they're pulling out faster than anything. You would not believe about the collapse in the financial state of the wind farm industry, which I'll be going into. And I'm going into their accounts. Okay? The whole idea, it's absolutely bonkers. And without a subsidy, wind doesn't work. Wind is one of the most expensive forms of energy you can get. And I'll explain why. So yes, you can lease out a seabed. Yes, you can block your seascape. Yes, you can be left with 45 square miles of rusting wreck after 15 to 20 years or less, because no developer covers the huge cost of end of life. None of the wind farms we've put up actually allow for the escrow account like the oil industry has to. None of them. And say, let's put so much a year aside. I wonder what that is. Put so much money aside, because unless you want to be left with 45 square miles of rusting wreck, both below and above the water, right near you, right, you've got to have that fund. But none of them have that fund. None of them. Only in the oil and gas industry do they insist on it. But they're not subsidised. Yeah?
Excuse me, from an evidence perspective.
Sorry?
From an evidence perspective, you have no evidence about what contract Jersey would have. So it's quite possible that Jersey would have a fund in its contract.
Yeah, fine. I totally agree with what you've just said. What the gentleman's just said is, from a Jersey perspective, I have no idea, because neither of you, it's the future contract, right? And so they may have that in. And actually, when I was discussing this with Graham, I said, I don't want to put that in, because unless you have that in, you are in danger. But also putting that in will kill any development. Let me tell you that, because the costs are enormous of recovering it above and below the water, right? All I've said is, as a matter of fact, that none of them to date have it in. And none of the economic models for wind farms have it in. So you could be the different one and then add another maybe a few £1 billion, £500 million to £1 billion to the project. So you've now knocked out 10, 20% of the project. You've knocked it out, right? I've been working on those costs. They're quite considerable. Not less than £500 million, not less than that. So it wouldn't be 4.08 billion, that'd be 4.5 billion. And so all those things eat in. But you're quite right. I'm evidence-based. So I'm going on the evidence of every single wind farm to date. And you could be different. And if you don't do that, I think you'd be mad, because you destroy your environment around you, right? They're going to destroy theirs, but I hope you wouldn't be. So, and you can kill a lot of seabirds as a bonus, but we'll go into that, right? Okay, so I've got 3 questions for you at this point. 1, was the 4 billion capital cost a surprise to you?
No.
Pardon?
No.
No? No, not to you. No, you're one of the speakers. Right. So, was it a surprise? What is a surprise to you, Kirsten? No?
No.
But why aren't the public knowing that then?
Because we haven't even got to the point where we're saying the piece of work we're doing at the moment is about the scale, the scope, what you do with the energy. That's yet to be determined.
I'm just intervening here with a comment. This is the start of a silly discussion, because having come up with a 4 billion, that's not mentioned anywhere prior to me stating it. That's apparently not being costed at all in this feasibility thing they've been working on a year. The minister now states that it's not a surprise to him because it's too early in the development. Yeah? Well, actually, this is very silly, because if I can, with a few hours' work, come in with the estimated cost based on what's already built nearby, right, and so simple, and they've spent a year on it, it shows the shallowness of the whole case they have. They have spent a year doing nothing. In actual fact, all that's needed here is to approach wind farm developers, that's their customer, that's the Jersey Island customer, who wish to rent the seabed, and they then sell it on. So, and they would do the feasibility. They would do that. Jersey shouldn't even be involved in doing this. So it's trying to interject itself into all sorts of things. Why? Because it's trying to take all the profit from it. And the facts are, the profit's not for it. Above the rental of the seabed, there's no money in it for Jersey. Fact.
So we are doing that work at the moment, because this isn't necessarily about the government of Jersey paying for that.
No, I know, they can't.
This is about
I go on to say they can't.
Likely to be developers paying for that. So
correct.
Again, we will, if the economics do not add up, we will say that, and we will say this is not the road we're going down.
Okay.
So I'm not worried about these things, because these are the questions Jersey is asking itself at the moment.
Fine. Well, I'm just explaining them to the public. Okay. I'll be going into.
Can I quickly ask a question?
Yes.
I think what Deputy Morrill is saying is interesting, but what might be interesting to the public is to understand what this whole process is actually costing.
Yeah, I'll be going into it.
Because effectively what you're saying, Paul, is that it's obvious that at 4 billion this isn't making much sense.
No, but I go into it now.
But how much? It's about how much of the states of Jersey spending to get to a realisation that many people probably already understand.
Of the 200 million a year.
Well, no, I think that's deeply unfair. If you have to do this in a proper, methodical, evidence-based way, as the gentleman is arguing, you have to pay to get evidence. That's just a reality. The gentleman, for all his learning, etc., does not have the evidence about Jersey's specific wind farm, and you have to pay to get that evidence. I'm sure he would agree with me that to get evidence, you have to pay for evidence.
I know certain things about Jersey's wind farm because I know about wind farms.
Yeah,
I'll be going into this.
I'll
be going into this in detail. I'll be going into this in detail. This is an evolving story. Okay, so it's just that. If you ask how yourself how economic reports have been written without you knowing this, fine, that's up to you as Jersey residents. Ask yourself why there's no appendix detailing the calculations yield that you've been given. You've been told it's 6 pence a kilowatt hour, right? I've just shown you it's another 5p for the interest alone, right? So they have given prices out to you. They've given you 6 pence a kilowatt hour. That is deceptive. It's totally deceptive. And I want to make, well, all right, then tell me how it isn't deceptive.
I was rereading it yesterday. It actually says, for the purpose of this model, we have used 6 pence a kilowatt hour, just as a conservative estimate. That's what it says in the document.
Conservative.
So we've not given a definite, this is 6 pence a kilowatt hour. And this is what I meant about...
No, but what you've done is tell the public
but
that
what you're doing is trying to change what is actually happening. You're trying to give a different narrative which doesn't exist.
Well,
around what the government of Jersey has or hasn't provided.
If I see a document, as members of the public watching a document saying conservatively, which means at the most it's going to be about 6 pence per kilowatt hour, we don't know that exactly yet because we haven't done it and so on, that I still think is misleading because it can't be that. That's not a possible figure. So whoever's come up with the 6 pence, where's that calculation? And if I could see the calculation, I'd rip it apart. I know I would, because it's not factual. So I disagree with you on that, okay? So you're being handed tablets of stone is what I'm saying. There's no appendix I could get my hands into, Right. So you first need a willing buyer and a willing developer. Okay, you will invest 4.0. Why invest? And I've got to say to developer, because Jersey can't do it. No one is even contemplating, I'm sure, Jersey spending 4.08 billion. That's not possible. So a developer's got to spend that, right? So why invest 4.0 billion with preference to you for the same money? They maybe get better returns elsewhere. The North Sea, the average wind speeds exceeding, these are just facts, the average wind speeds exceeding 9 to 10 metres a second. St. Bruick is 7 to 9 metre range. St. Bruick's location sheltered by the Brittany Peninsula, by the way. That's why. So it's less productive than the North Sea. It is not more productive, it's less. So you'd have less wind at St. Bruick, but you claim a higher yield. You actually do claim a 43.3% yield because you've given me how many hours come out of it, how many megawatt hours come out of it. So you've given me how much electricity comes out of this. And you just divide that out and you get 43.3%. That is not a viable thing, but we'll go into that. The strike price now for St. Bruick, the strike price, and let me explain this. The model, as I mentioned before, is all about this. We will buy every single bit of electricity you produce, that's what Britain does, the UK does, no matter whether we need it or not. Yeah? This results, as you'll see, in negative pricing. Spain's suffering from it today, where they're having to pay to give electricity away. But we'll go into that. Now, St. Bruick, the strike price reported in 2011 when they started, right, was €200 per megawatt hour, and that's inflation proofed. So I've taken the euro inflation since then, which is 33%, and that works out at the end of the day to 22.6 pence per kilowatt hour, not your 6 pence. So I'm just taking St. Bruick figures here and applying them, making the claim of 6 pence per kilowatt hour look silly. You'd be paying 3 to 4 times that for the domestic power rate, right? So you'd be up to 60, 70, 80 pence for your domestic power. So that I'm just going on what St. Bruick's doing, because France is buying that at 22.6, but they don't have constraints. They don't say, we'll buy everything. So if you say, I'm not going to buy everything from you, they'll say, fine, I want much more money. Yeah, because in the end, I've got to make the same amount of money, whether you have compensation for that or not. It's the same money. This is fun. Yeah.
This seems to me like something that's to do with the developer who's going to be taking on the project. So Jersey isn't going to be the one paying the capital for the project. That would be the project developer. Jersey's simply receiving for the lease for the seabed, the royalties for the seabed.
Which I've got no problem with.
So it seems to me that if the finance is happy with the risk, they're the ones that are taking on the risk, they're the ones that are doing the deal with the French. Why should Jersey worry? Because our lease is guaranteed.
Yeah, exactly. What I've just said is there's no way that Jersey can do this. There's no way that Jersey can do this.
We're not trying to, actually.
But then why would you? I don't want Jersey to spend any money on this scheme. You see, that's what I'm trying to stop, because it's just wasteful. Because in the end, it's not viable, and I'll be explaining it. My job is to explain what wind power is all about, and in particular in relation to Jersey. So what I've come up with is, did you know that the St. Bruick ones were selling their power at 22.6 pence? Pardon?
It's Saint-Brieuc, not St. Bruick.
St. Brieuc, right. I don't know how to say it. I'm uneducated, okay? But yeah, everyone knows what I mean. So as long as they know what I mean, I don't care.
It's just hard on the ears.
Well, I say it again,
Saint-Brieuc.
Saint-Brieuc. All right, thank you. So that's why that goes on. So what I've tried to do is just demolish the 6 pence per kilowatt hour, which is misleading in my view, because it goes out to the public, not as a figure, but as a conservative figure. Oh, you know, that's probably the most it's going to be, but we don't know it yet exactly. I think that's wrong. Okay? So,
Can I just ask on that figure?
Sorry?
Can I just ask on that figure?
Which figure?
Your 6 pence.
Yeah.
And the figure you're talking about.
Yeah.
Is that based on a CFD model for coming onto the taxpayer or a RAB?
No, I don't know whether they do. But let me explain. CFD means contracts for the difference. And in Britain, what we do is we pay a fixed price. We go to auction and we agree a price for the energy. Now, if that day the price on energy in the market is higher, they have to give us the money back. And if the price is lower that day on the energy, we give it to them. So they get the same amount of money no matter what, making our Ed Miliband in government, well, I've got to say I'm a liar, because he says it's changed gas and all this is changing the price. It doesn't. Those prices are fixed. So I don't know whether France do CFD. I tried to find out. I know they don't like doing the constraint payments. So they'd rather pay an amount and forget it. Yeah? They'd rather do that than the other. Whereas UK model says, no, we'll pay the constraints. So some Scottish wind farms, 51% of the time are paid to switch off.
But obviously through a CFD or a RAB model, the taxpayer does pay through the bills.
That's right. The taxpayer is paying
Which I
all the
think is
time.
worth people
All the
knowing.
time. What I'm saying is this idea that wind is the cheapest is absolutely absurd, right? Right, you're being told about great profits, an opportunity not to be missed, but you're being totally misled by the cost of energy from it. That's why I'm not mincing my words. This presentation, by the end of which you should have a good idea of how misled you've been. There should be no handshake on this one. That's what I'm saying. Right. I'm also saying this. I try to get these little graphics going with artificial intelligence. Quite difficult, but you can keep on going till you get something right. Somebody needs to start asking for the data and calculations that back up the claims to date and let them be openly examined. So surely that's fair enough. Where's all the appendices with how they got to the estimate of 6p? Where's all the appendices? Yes, where is it all? Yeah, you should ask for openness. If the answers aren't there and you can't get those calculations, then you can't trust the people providing them. Full stop. Right, a reality check. I'm going to give you an example now of just how expensive wind power is. Right. One, I'm going to take Pembroke, near where I live actually, Pembroke gas station as an example. Now, I'm not advocating gas here or anything. I'm just giving you an idea compared to fossil fuels about cost of wind. Pembroke gas station's 2,200 megawatt E. The E just means that's what it produces in electricity. Yeah, and it supplies that 24/7. You ask for it and you get it. Pembroke gas station cost 800 million. Your 1,000 million wind farm are giving 400 megawatts average and assuming a 40% load factor, because you don't get your 1,000 and you don't get nothing, you get about 40%. Okay? That one gets 400, not 2,200. The wind farm intermittent power from 0 to 1,000. So it's up and down. Yeah? You can't tell what it's going to be tomorrow. Gas is on call 24/7 at full load. The capital cost per megawatt for wind is 10.2 million. Gas is 363,000. So you've got to compare 10.2 million to 363,000 pounds. Yeah? That is just a straight comparison. But there's an enormous lot of extra costs on the wind, which I'll be coming to, that aren't even mentioned to you. Capital costs are 28 times more for wind than for gas. 28 times, right? The Isle of Man plant produces electric at circa, the Isle of Man one, that produces from their small gas stations, not as efficient as the British ones now, the latest ones, 9 pence. Britain produces them between 5 and 6p, okay? Wind farms are 22 pence per kilowatt hour plus many additional costs. So gas produces electric at a quarter the price of the wind and has inertia. Inertia? What the hell's that sort of thing? I'll be coming to it because it's critical. So you pay 28 times more to obtain electricity at a very high price, right? Not all wind energy can be used, so the comparison reality is even worse because you can't use all the energy because you don't need it and there's no way of storing it. Forget that, right? So now we'll go on to questions. Any questions?
If you're distributing the power to the European grid, surely there's not a limited amount of customers, and you actually need grid balancing to take care of that. But the European grid is large enough to take this power if it's sensibly planned.
Yes, but no, you've got to have the customer.
This is the European grid customers.
No, you haven't started this process by getting a customer. You should have gone to a customer, like the European grid, and you should have said to it, we've got a seabed we think can be developed by a developer, and you should have then gone to a developer to say, have you got any interest? Because where they're going to spend their 4 billion, there's far better places to spend it than
This is all being looked at now. This is a
but what I'm trying to expose to the public is the process, yes, and what's going on, and the 6p I think is unforgivable. Right? So I just wanted to expose some of the things to the public of what's going on. Now, the process normally is you find the customer, you have conversation, will you take power if we can provide it? Simple question. Excuse me. Right.
Again, you talk about evidence. You have said we don't have a customer. What evidence do you have for that?
Have you got a customer?
Well,
I'm asking a member of your parliament.
We are
do you have one?
So we are absolutely in conversations with
France. I didn't say that.
No,
I said, do you have a customer?
Sorry. We are speaking to France, the French energy grid, to RTE, the French buyer of energy,
right.
Because, as the gentleman back there said, we are at that feasibility stage.
Yeah.
And so the work we are doing is the feasibility. And we have started by talking to a potential customer. That's been one of our very first steps. But you made the comment without evidence that we are not talking to customers.
I didn't say that.
And so we are.
I didn't. I
so
said
I think
you
it's
don't
very
have
important.
a customer and you should be talking to them.
But we don't have We don't have a project
You
yet.
don't-
We have a feasibility study.
Now, let me explain. You don't have a customer. That's a fact.
But we don't
You've
have
just
a
agreed with
project.
me. That's a fact. You
But we don't have a
customer.
project.
Fine, but you don't have a customer. But before you actually have to start in principle. If it was me, I'd be going to the people who want to buy electricity in the grid, and I would say, "Are you interested in this?"
that's what we're
being
doing.
bought? And then if they said yes, you'd have a customer. They haven't said
But
yes
that's
yet,
what we're
so you've
doing.
got a customer.
That's the process
Fine.
we're in
Good,
right now.
Good. And without that, do you agree you haven't got anything?
But
Without
we
that,
are-
you
we
agree.
are- without a customer, yes, you don't have much of a project because the whole thing's predicated on export. But you are suggesting we are not talking to
I didn't
potential
say that.
customers.
No, I didn't suggest
we
that.
are talking
No,
to
I
potential
said what
customers.
I would do is I would do this. I'd be talking.
Well,
right,
that's good, 'cause
and then
we
I
are doing
made a
that, so
statement
you'll be pleased
that
to
you
know.
don't have a customer.
You'll be
You
pleased to
don't
know
have
we
a
are
customer.
talking to potential customers.
So you don't have a customer, but you are talking. Great. Well, that's what all I'm suggesting is, if it was me, I said I'd be talking, and that's what I'm doing.
Isn't it a case of first things first?
Yes.
Surely you should find out if it's viable via.
We're at a feasibility study. We're doing a feasibility study.
Right, I'm pausing just to make a few things clear here for everybody. The people who are going to spend the 4 billion, if it's going ahead at any stage, would be the wind farm developer, not France, not Jersey. And they're the ones who are key to this. Now, normally, the country like France or Britain would say, we've got a seabed to auction off, how do you want it? That's what UK does. It auctions off the seabed and it does an agreement with the wind farm. Yeah, but that would be between France and the wind farm developer. Jersey wouldn't be involved in that. They've got all mixed up here. It is not up to them to do the feasibility study because the wind farm developer would have to do it anyway. You wouldn't trust them, so he would do it anyway. What they're doing is putting cart before horse completely. So without that wind farm developer spending the 4 billion, and what I'm trying to point out is it's not a great place to spend it. There are better places, right? Without that, you've got nothing, even if you have France wanting it. So that is the key. And that's, so yeah, put it simply, France, will you take energy if it can be provided? Are you interested? Just in principle. Yes, okay, fine. Let's find a wind farm developer. Wind farm developer, there it is. How much are you willing to bid for the seabed? What you're trying to do as Jersey is get involved with a technical that get in the way of that. And let me tell you, there's no margin there for you. There's no money there for you. The only money for you in this project is renting out the seabed. But like absolute children, you are going about this the wrong way.
Well, yeah, but the way it's been, well, but let's go into it. You're going to learn a lot about wind. So you've already learned that in the case of gas, for example, it costs you 28 times more to put it up, and it costs you much more to produce it, about 3 to 4 times. Right, let's go through some economics now. Now, no one can deny this. This is just the report that's been produced by Jersey. And they're saying the demand now is between 80 and 160 megawatts a day, and that'll rise by 2040 to 100 to 200. They're not my figures that from that report, right? Okay? So I'm now going to play a little video. Hold on. But I should play a video. What I'm trying to explain there, the trouble is now, because some of the videos coming are very important, and we tested this yesterday, Graham. Right, basically, the big problem with wind is it varies. It varies all the time. And in this case, I've just taken, they're using 43.3% the debt out of it. In actual fact, they won't. So let's just call it a round figure of 40, because it doesn't really matter for this. So taking 40, that, and you go through the analysis in the day of what you need, yes? It's way past what you need. I mean, so I agree with Kirsty, I agree totally that you can't bring it ashore here. It's got to be supplied to Europe, right? The extra economics cost of bringing it ashore here and everything, I don't think you'll find that's viable in the report. Right, so it's going to be transported there. So it's far too big for you. So it isn't that you're getting it. The only deal here is you're selling it to the grid in Europe. That's the money. That's the only deal. Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, that's the point. If we're going to make money, if it's feasible to make money, then it's worth going ahead with. If it's not feasible to make money, it's not worth going ahead with.
Correct.
It's really simple.
Dead simple. But don't forget, before I came here as well, it's all vague about whether stump's going to be here and it's 6 pence per kilowatt. Why mention that? So it was all over the
But
place.
you've taken our very first highest level document, which says that what we need to do next is a proper feasibility study.
Yes.
We are in the middle of compiling that feasibility study.
Fine.
That's happening
Okay,
at the moment.
that's fine.
This would be better after that feasibility study.
Yeah.
So then you could pull apart the feasibility study, which would be the appropriate thing to do. But you're
Right.
kind of a bit early here.
Right.
Sorry, Paul, can I just raise something? Because I've learnt something today when you said that we won't necessarily use any of the wind ourselves.
For the reasons that Paul said.
Yeah, which I understand. But I went to the town hall meeting when Deputy Jonathan Renoff was speaking, when he was going to the town hall. And I'm pretty sure he said that the wind farm would allow us to establish our own energy costs.
He probably did say that. He's no
And
longer a
he also
minister.
Well, he didn't actually introduce him as the advisor to the government on renewables, but it was Mark Leyburn. He just happened to be in the audience, apparently. The message then was that the wind farm will allow Jersey to establish our own energy costs, which is the whole reason for people's concerns, I think.
So-
But now the message that we're receiving is, oh, well, we may not necessarily. So I think this is the problem. It isn't
But
clear.
I
Correct.
think, could I just say, I think you're right. And I think, as I just said to Paul, you're all just a bit too early. And this is one of the difficulties we have in Jersey. So what we did, the process so far is, we knew we got this big economic challenge. We have to look at potential ways of earning some money, quickly, quite simply, okay? One of those potential ways is selling energy to Europe. That first analysis that's up there now was our own economics team, doing a very quick but a very rough, by their own admission, study. So where Paul starts picking apart the numbers, I've no doubt the numbers can be picked apart. The point was just, a quick look. Do we think there is a technology, renewable technology, that could earn money for Jersey? We looked at 6 or 7 different renewable technologies. Out of that fell, yes, it's possible that wind might work, but we need to then do a proper analysis to see whether that stands up in the light of, actual real world conditions, as Paul's suggesting. That analysis is happening now. And out of that analysis will fall, should we land any in Jersey, yes or no?
Again, to make it crystal clear, I'll stop it just for a second or two. The only people who can make the money out of this, besides the seabed lease, which Jersey can get, is the wind farm developer. It's as simple as that. And what they're trying to do is sort of halfway work with a wind farm developer. Well, they're not going to do that unless they can put billions in, which isn't going to happen. And this is where the whole concept is wrong. And I'd also argue that it's very confusing when they're telling Jersey residents that it's a conservative figure of 6p, indicating super cheap electricity. And by the way, that's what leaves the farm, what leaves the wind farm. It's not what the people pay. But that is a very misleading thing to have done, because it would indicate they're getting the wind. And it's this total confusion of what's going on. And even now the minister said they will determine whether it's coming ashore or not. It won't be up to you, Jersey. It'll be up to the wind farm developer. And to put it simply, you either put your money where your mouth is and get the profits, or you don't. And you can't do it, Jersey. Only the wind farm developer can do it. And you haven't even approached a wind farm developer who would do that feasibility study for you if they were interested. And without them, you haven't got anything. So your customer, in a sense, is the wind farm developer, not France. French customer is the wind farm.
As I said, my personal opinion, and I had a big conversation with Jonathan Renoff where I said to him, I don't think we'll land any of this energy in Jersey. I don't think it stacks up if you land some of it in Jersey.
I totally agree with that.
But that's my personal, unevidence-based opinion, okay? And that piece of work is all happening right now. It will report later this year. And that's the piece of work we need to look at very closely. It's that piece of work and those findings. This is all too high level. No one is trying to say this is the case upon which everything rests. The next piece of work is the case upon which everything will rest. And that's the piece of work which will tell us, do we land any? Do we not land any in Jersey? Do we sell it all to Europe? Do we sell it to the UK? Is the wind farm viable? That piece of work will tell us if a wind farm is not viable. So this is what kind of frustrates me, is we're still very open-minded about all of this. It has always been a fail-fast project. But to the gentleman behind me who said, how much are you spending? You have to spend to find these things out. If we don't spend some money to do feasibility studies, we will never do anything in Jersey.
Who's doing the
ever.
feasibility study? Who?
We have engaged a renewable energy consultancy.
Did that go to tender? Was that a choice?
I
between
couldn't tell
people
you
or
because
just one was appointed?
genuinely I'm going to give you not my department perspective, so I couldn't hand on heart this second tell you how we went to it.
Right.
We had multiple
Yeah.
But can I just respond to that? Because, as I said to you, he was going around the parish halls and, selling it to us, or so number one, that's the first thing we were told it was going to.
Absolutely. And Jonathan was a strong believer that we should land some in Jersey.
So that wasn't right. So we're not. I don't think that was done intentionally, but nevertheless, this is. What I'm trying to say to you is what the public perception is.
I know. That's why we've got to wait for this report.
The main question, while they were talking, I'm thinking, I'm sure I just saw something about this Danish company and it had cost 5 billion. It cost them 5 billion in this lost wind farm project. So I quickly Googled, and there were 5 within the last 6
Yes, that's
months
right. Last year was a bad
failed.
year for wind energy. Yeah.
Failed. And so I asked the question of Mark Labourne, it turns out, why are there all these failures, and how do we know that this one is going to be a success? And his answer was, well, COVID had an impact on many. That was his answer.
Look, but I don't care what Mark Labourne said, because he's not in the government of Jersey.
He's your advisor.
Yeah.
And so, of
But what's
course,
the point?
I care what he says. But my final question to him was, well, who is going to pay for the clean-up if it goes wrong? If this conglomerate fails, who's going to pay for the clean-up?
Yeah.
Who is?
Well, that's all part of the piece of work we're doing at the moment.
Can we carry on? Sorry.
This is my point.
I've got the video working now.
I think it's really, I think it's really important. We are doing that work now to determine whether this wind farm is not predetermined. This wind farm may not go ahead. That is absolutely possible.
My concern
sorry,
I
if I
totally
could just finish
understand
what
what
I
you're
was saying.
Let me just quickly,
We need to understand where we
gotta
are in
get
the
on with it.
process, and we are very, very early in the
I
process.
think what Kirsten's bringing forward is a logical, rational way to approach things.
That's what I'm trying to say.
No,
And
I hear that.
It's hard when
The
people seem to
reason-
not want the logical,
well, the
rational
reason
process.
we're doing this, you need to understand also from concerned public, we're not aware that you're doing all this and it's
We've
available.
been publicly said it.
Well, we had enough concern that we wanted to.
We have
let
said
this-
we're doing a
let me
strategic
finish.
analysis
Sorry,
now.
let me just finish. So what we're trying to do by bringing this is inform you, so as you go forward with your debates, you can take some of this into account and other things.
Yeah.
Which all this is about is getting more information so that you can move forward in a better
accept
way
that.
to do it. And you accept that, and that's why you're here
I accept
supporting
that.
it.
And I
I
think
just
you're
don't
great
like.
being here, by
I
the
don't
way.
like it when people make it sound. So I would suggest that Mr. Burgess's presentation made it sound like we were landing energy in Jersey, given.
No,
No, I didn't.
And that's
no,
not.
it's
and
actually
also,
on my screen. I said, I just said to you right away, I said, I totally agree it won't be landed in Jersey. It'll be uneconomic to do it. I said that, right? But the way it's been presented to the public is it's sort of being landed in
because
Jersey.
they have, because we
Yeah, hold on,
honestly
hold on. Yeah, I
don't
understand
100%
that.
know.
I understand that. The problem
That's what
is,
he's
I
saying.
believe you've had
Sure.
some very bad advice, which has given misleading information on the way. Anyway, I need to get on with this.
That's why we're doing it.
Right, this should play now. A voice should
This
come.
report predicts a cost of 6 pence per kilowatt hour for your energy from the wind farm. Today, the UK pays 8.3 pence per kilowatt hour, and you're not going to get it cheaper than that. But this 8.3 pence comes with certain conditions. The first condition is that the price is not fixed. It must rise every month by the amount of inflation in the consumer price index. So if the wind farm was ready for operation this month, you would already be paying 38% more than the cost in that report. So the second condition is even more important: constraint payments. It means that you have to pay for every single kilowatt hour they could produce from that wind farm, even if you do not want it. In effect, you have to pay them to shut off when you do not want it if you can't sell it. Now, if you didn't agree to the constraint payment condition, they would have to calculate what that would be and just add it to the price per kilowatt hour. So it makes no difference how you do it. The entire model of the wind farm industry is on that basis. It turns the normal customer-supplier relationship upside down. You serve it, it does not serve you. I will just give you one simple example of the problems that creates. And here we are, a nice tranquil scene overnight. Everyone's gone to bed. Demand for power really drops very low, but your luck is out because that night the wind picks up and the turbines can shove out as much as 1,000 megawatts, but you only want 80. You now have to pay for 920 megawatts of energy you don't want and ask them to switch off or try to sell it. But the problem with selling it is everyone else is in the same position with high winds and low demand overnight. And that, in essence, is the simplest way I can explain the problem to you.
Okay, so we'll go on after that. Right. So I'll quickly whip through this. You've heard about St. Brick, Sunt Brick, whatever you call it, 22 pence per kilowatt hour, no constraints. So the UK pays 8.3 with constraints. You pay one way or the other. It assumes long-term energy storage, by the way, that doesn't exist. And it assumes you can develop such a large 4.0 project. You have a developer. It forgets to mention many costs like inertia, which we'll come to. I don't expect you to understand at the moment. The removal costings can claim yield too high. The cult lives on in fairyland, in my opinion. Right? But we'll carry on quick now. I'll catch up. Any questions at this point? We can go on with it. Yeah.
Obviously, you've got, if you were doing that, and if the scheme would go forward, you would have to take a holistic view. So when you're talking about producing and paying for energy in the evening, there are other things you can bring in, like other industries, data mining, and actually deal with those sort of off-peak excess demands. So yes. I think you do make the point. You have to look at holistically how you use energy.
Yeah, I agree. So anyway, right, there's no such thing as a silly question, just silly answers by me.
Okay. Can I just ask whether the calculations per kilowatt hour are not an irrelevance? An irrelevance in the sense of what is important is whether we have a customer. And if we have a customer, then the customer is going to have to decide whether or not the technical arrangements are sufficient.
That's right. Totally correct. That's why I start saying go and get a customer. Right. So, and that, right. So, explaining the basics through the day supply and demand. So, I got a nice shot of Jersey there, and I'll just start this.
This is a typical demand curve for a 48-hour period in the UK, showing you where the electricity is coming from to meet that demand. The blue part is the gas, the orange part's the solar, and the green part's the wind. The purple part is the importer. That's importing from Europe into the UK, just as you would from France. Now it's worth stopping and taking a look at the point here, where the UK was totally reliant on the gas and the imports. The wind was so little as to be barely nothing, and even if you treble it in the future as we plan to, you'd still get, well, next to nothing. So you're the opposite of what they're claiming. They're claiming independence from fossil fuels and imports, etc. In actual fact, totally reliant on it, even in the future. And the reason is, there is no such thing as any significant backup storage to the variations you get in our power supplies. There is none. Batteries and all these things they talk about, such as hydrogen and so on, zilch. No chance whatsoever of those being used for any long-term backup. So to make this more realistic for Jersey, we're going to do away with the solar now. Now for this period then, you'd just be left with the gas and with the import. That's your import from France, because the wind is less than 2%. So there are periods can be as much as 9 or more days when the wind is next to nothing. We had 9 days in September 2018 in the UK when the wind was less than 1%, and that is not the worst case. Now, in your case here, you don't have gas. So what you've got basically, I'm ignoring the tiny contributions you've got from little things, what you've got here is when this happens and there's hardly any wind, basically all your power has to come from the interconnector. So you're still totally reliant on it, but in a very different sporadic manner. So what I'm doing now is adding your wind farm to the diagram to show you how, when the wind's blowing well and you're getting 1,000 megawatt out, how your demand is completely dwarfed by the excess energy. Now keep in mind, when the wind's below about 10 miles an hour, wind farms don't produce any energy. They can't turn the blades. And when it's above 45 to 50 miles an hour, in the same way, they have to turn off to protect themselves and they can't produce any energy. So both extremes produce zero energy. Okay, carry on now with a few lessons from that. So when wind's high, it is like trying to sell snow to Eskimos. It really is, right? When the wind's high. And it's a painful process, that. Okay? And I'll show you what happens in the UK, your neighbour. I'll show you what happens when we have too much. And we're going to have much worse. In fact, the Ed Miliband NESO thing are reporting, I think it's 19 billion or 9 billion in constraint payments a year by 2050. And they had a meeting scheduled in March to discuss how to get around it. And they had a meeting and decided to delay it a year till the next March, right? And of course, when there's too much wind, it's the same thing. I'm just doing nice things, same message. So when there's no wind, and you get no wind over Europe, by the way, you get it everywhere, yeah? And so I asked Grok, which is an artificial intelligence thing, to work out for here, roughly give me an idea of what it's like in the Channel Islands. And between 23% and 38% of the time, the wind farm will produce nothing for you. Okay? That's low and high winds, as it were. And, today, is the wind more than 10 miles an hour sort of thing? Are you with me? And by the way, in a wind farm, the way it works, this is going to get technical. If you don't understand, tell me. But it's to the power of 3, the drop-off in power. So if you go from their perfect wind is, say, 25 miles an hour to get that magic 1,000 megawatts, if you half the wind, you reduce their power output to an eighth, right? So even if you're 15 miles an hour, you have very little energy coming out because of the nature of it. Okay. So your current demand 636, and don't forget, I was basing this on you using some wind energy, which has been made clear by some logic here that you wouldn't be doing, which is great, because it doesn't make sense, right? So what I've dealt with here, sometimes, so I'm saying at times it's 12 times your overnight winter, and sometimes it can be 20 times what you need. So it's a silly thing to do, yeah? So let's move on to some examples. What do we do with the surplus? UK pays people to take it away. It's called negative energy pricing. Now, I'm going to come into some technical things, but are super easy to understand. Right, you would have enormous amounts of surplus, because if you take that graph, you're up here, yeah? So you can't use it. I don't think even anyone now, from what I understand, is proposing this, right? I think this is not being proposed for you to bring all the energy onto a thing and try to sell it or use it. It doesn't make sense. So I'm going to quickly whip through that, right? And so on. All right. So you have too much. Everyone has too much. You have too little. Everyone has too little. And this one here is interesting. If you take the point here, there, we're trebling the wind in UK. Now that green part's the wind. So you've now got to treble that to be off the chart. That's what we're doing. So we're now taking the amount of wind past our demand levels. So when the wind's high, our constraint payments are going to be enormous. If I take the Isle of Man, their wind proposal is below their minimum. So it's below their base. You have a base demand, you can run 24 hours a day. Nuclear is perfect for it, by the way. And on top of that, you've got the variation in the day. Nuclear can't do that at the moment, okay, because it can't vary things. Gas can. And so if you take
one of your supplies like wind above all that, then you're up into the stratosphere there, you're permanently paying constraint payments. But then at times you're having to buy in. And I'm going to give you some real life examples. And according to NESO, it's £19 billion a year by 2030 for us, because we're trebling it. Yeah? So when we got next to nothing, we still have next to nothing. And when we got too much, we got way too much. Right. What happens when you have no wind and an interconnector? Because we have all those interconnectors, that bottom of the chart. Britain was forced to get electricity from Belgium during a heat wave to stop blackouts in London. They paid the highest price on record, 5,000% higher than the typical price. 5,000% higher. These are all extra costs for anyone, doesn't matter who the customer is, operating wind. Unprecedented crisis with British electricity. They paid. Now normally you're buying in, at that time you were buying in £60, £70 a megawatt hour. They paid £9,724 per megawatt hour. That's what happened when you got no wind, because they had no wind as well, right? So the shortage was terrible, right? So that's when you've got too little. What happens? Right, any questions at this point? Yeah.
Hi, Paul. Thank you very much. I'm here to learn, listen, whatever. But what keeps in my head is, why would France buy power off Jersey when they've got the great big wind whirlybirds out there and they've got everything else? Why on earth would they buy?
Oh, well, I'll answer it first. I know you want to answer, but I'll answer that first.
So
in my view, people are just going in for it. It's a cult. And they're going in regardless of cost. And I'll show you, all the countries with the most wind and solar are the most expensive electricity in the world. All of them, right? Well, if you want a formula for how much electricity is going to cost, you know, we've got a great scheme in Britain. We managed to close Port Talbot Steelworks, and then they're changing over to electric arc, apparently. And we're doing, you know, an absolute mess at the moment with Scunthorpe, but we're going to electric arcs with some. But we've got the most expensive commercial electricity in the developed world, which makes it totally uncompetitive to do it. I mean, children are running our country. I can speak with authority on all that, I can tell you. They're running our country, and that's the state of it. There is no excuse at all. So it's a cult. And if you can look good by having green credentials, yes, if you can say, I've got this and I've got this big renewable thing, which is falling apart worldwide as they go into the economics, because you're going to be shattered. My most popular video this year, it got about 40,000 views, was on the economics of wind farms. And what I did was, you'll see coming up anyway, but it's a cult, that's why. Sorry.
Thank you. I'd stand up for this because it's only because Barbara's asked the question. I was sitting there thinking, I'm going to have to talk about France at some point because it is worth knowing about it. So Philip and Paul's perspective, having a customer is absolutely the right thing to do. And as I said in my speech, the economic value of this wind farm is where the real value of this wind farm lies, rather than, and I speak personally, rather than landing in Jersey, etc. For the many good reasons, I think to land wind energy in Jersey would likely be very disruptive. But so what is France doing is one of the big questions, and this bit hasn't been seen in anywhere today, the context. France, whether we like it or not, has embarked upon a massive renewable energy program. Okay, it doesn't matter what we think, France is doing it. I can't remember the figures for Brittany, but basically, by the end of that program, which is only kind of 20 odd years away, the Cotentin Peninsula, right next door, will be generating 10% of France's energy needs from principally wind, but obviously nuclear because it has it there as well. Brittany is going on a massive wind farm building program. Whether we like it or not, they're doing it. Okay, so it
depends who gets into the next French Parliament.
1.5 gigawatts in service, and their plan is another 45 by 2050.
Exactly. Whether we like it or not, Jersey's
do what they like.
Is going to be covered in winter.
Okay, just a sec. Keep going. Let them finish.
Or not, Jersey winter, it will be covered in winter. Right? France, really importantly, has come to us and said, would you consider being part of our wind project? So basically it has said, if you're building a wind farm, we would like to talk about that wind farm being part of France's targets.
Okay, that's good to know.
Perspective. And so this is where the customer piece comes from. Our conversations with France are very grown up, very serious conversations about France taking our wind power. And so why does France want it? Ask France. But the point is, we know they want this power. So we see a customer and that has a supply issue, we have the potential to supply them with what they are demanding. Their reasons for it.
Just wait. Well,
Okay,
that's
can I
very.
just
By
make
the
a-
way,
I wanna
just a
make a
sec.
point.
That's very helpful. By the way,
Yeah.
thank you.
I
I
wanna
think
make
it
a
was very
point on
helpful.
that.
That's happening whether we like it or
Yeah.
not.
It won't
France
be
are building
you.
wind
It won't be Jersey supplying the grid. It'll be the developer. The developer supplies the grid, right? All that Jersey have done is rent the seabed, right? This idea that Jersey can somehow control the power going to France is a fallacy. They will not allow that. The developer makes the money from that selling that power.
Sorry.
I would argue against that because the developer develops projects, then either moves on.
Yeah, I'll go into that. I'm going to go into it. You're quite right. But no, I'm going to go into that because that's very important. Okay? And I've actually got this covered. Yeah?
So can you tell me then, please? I know you're saying we're looking at potential of maybe landing some.
You have to look at the potential before going ahead.
Of course, and I understand that. That's fine. So that's a potential. But do you have any idea of are we looking at changing the source of our energy, or are you saying we're going to keep the French contract?
So that again is the piece of work that's happening at the moment. In my opinion, my guess is that the piece of work will come back and say, do not change your source of energy.
Right.
Carry on buying your energy from France exactly as you are today.
Perfect.
And land your
can all
energy,
go to the pub.
land your renewable energy.
I totally agree with that.
No, they have to finish the work though.
Okay.
But they're doing the work to support it.
But that's what the piece of work we're doing.
I totally agree with that. Don't forget this is news. A lot of what you're saying is news to me.
Yeah.
I'm
It hasn't
really-
been said before.
No, it hasn't. No, I'm sorry. I hasn't.
Can I just ask you a question to
Yeah.
Kirsten? You said earlier on, Kirsten.
Sorry, this often happens.
Right.
The same to me, I apologise.
Go ahead. You said earlier on that you're open-minded, presume it's the best
I
energy
think you have
solution
to
for
be,
the island.
yeah.
Correct. But hasn't the government painted Jersey into a corner by going for net zero?
I don't believe so, no. Because again, Jersey has low carbon energy. So basically, our energy today is low carbon. We don't need to change our energy source to be a low carbon jurisdiction. Our carbon energy is in cars, transport on island, and heating oil. Those together, that's more than 2/3 of our carbon consumption. So Jersey doesn't need to change its source of power to reduce its carbon emissions. Jersey just needs to run fewer cars, buy less petrol for those cars, and change its oil boilers into electricity boilers. That's what Jersey needs to do to cut its carbon emissions. So that's another reason. Wind power, as I said in my speech, if we were to land renewable energy in Jersey, you're substituting a new form of low carbon energy for an existing form of low carbon energy. And that, in my mind, doesn't make much sense when you've got a low cost,
You've already
low
got it.
carbon energy coming to Jersey.
You've already got it.
You've already got
No,
it.
we probably all agree with you, but the reason we know you're having a debate coming up, we want to make sure we get all the
That debate will
information.
only be after this study,
No.
which we're
Can
doing
I
has
ask,
been
can I ask
published.
a question? Would you agree that any lease, because anything involves a lease of the seabed, right? And would you agree that any lease of the seabed should incorporate a fund being set aside for when at the end of life, so you're not left with a mess? Would you agree that's the right thing?
At least from the seabed, or any contracts around the development of this,
Correct.
should deal with how is that
Clean up.
going to be taken down. Because one of the benefits of wind power is that those wind turbines are entirely temporary. They can be, it costs money, but they can be taken down. Unlike a coal-fired power
Well, you gotta
station or a
check down the
nuclear-fired
undersea
power
thing as
station or
well.
something like this. A wind turbines can be deconstructed and taken away. So your view can be restored at the end of 40 years. There's no
No, 40 years, we'll see to that. Anyway, I want to explain inertia.
Sorry.
Make one point, that's the question. This is mainly directed at Kirsten and in response to some of the comments that have been made. One of the questions I would have had is if this is such a great idea for Jersey, why would they not do this in France?
They are.
And then we've just heard that they're going to be building, what was it, 20 gigawatts?
Massive amount.
Okay. So
Our coastline's going to be
that's
surrounded by wind
that's an
turbines.
enormous amount. The key point here is France has got something called the Alps. And in the Alps, they have large amounts of hydroelectric power. And so internal in France, they can adjust their hydroelectric power. This is what the Swiss plan was. They shut off their hydroelectric power and conserve the water in their reservoirs. and then when the wind doesn't blow, they switch it on again. So they can independently, with combining wind with their hydropower, follow load. Jersey just doesn't have that opportunity. Neither have
Obviously, France is 75% nuclear.
Sorry?
France is 75% nuclear power. So I think the nuclear power and their ability to control nuclear power output is probably bigger than their hydro.
It's harder to control. You can't control
as a
it.
general rule. You can't turn nuclear.
No, you can't.
It just runs as continuous pitch. You can adjust it a little bit. That's what
Yeah, but tiny. Can we get on with it?
Just one speaker at a time, please.
Yeah.
You make an important point about the hydro and the electric, that to do that, what missing factor is there is the efficiency of the distribution network as well.
Correct.
Because France is a large country. We can't, in the UK, distribute from wind farms in the northwest down to London because the infrastructure isn't there. So they need that factoring in.
So I can just answer that point.
With respect, I need to get on with what I'm trying to say. Okay.
You said you wanted to be grilled, so...
No, but you're not. You're doing it between yourselves. You're not doing me.
Why a little bit?
Right, okay. Okay. Like, I'm going to explain inertia. Now, let me go to the next one. A flywheel spinning in an engine, yeah? An engine has got, an ordinary petrol engine's got all these pistons going. It's got a flywheel at the end which smooths out those strokes. So what a flywheel's about is smoothing out the energy going into it, yes? And it's critical because you'll need either flywheels or battery farms if you're supplying, or someone is going to have to install flywheels or battery farms to correct the dirty energy coming from wind. And it's dirty because it varies by the minute, right? Now, nuclear, gas, coal, all of them spun turbines at 3,000 times a minute. Everyone agreed. We produce electricity from the turbine going out at 3,000 revs a minute, which divide that by 60 is 50 revs a second. So when you look at the back of an electric appliance, your hairdryer, anything, it'll say 50 HZ on the back. That's your 50 cycles. The golden rule of all grids is you've got to keep the balance between supply and demand. If you have too much supply, somewhere's going to explode, right? If you don't do something about it. If you have too little, a lot of things are going to shut down. So supply and demand is critical. But there's one more thing that's critical, and that's the frequency at which it's supplied. And it's called inertia, right? So what they're doing, Ed Miliband's planning to put 100 gigantic, bigger than this building, hugely costed in vacuums and everything, flywheels, to spin the flywheels, to give the energy, to give the inertia to the wind. It's a huge extra cost. Battery farms can do it because battery farms are not, for what people think, they're not to supply any sort of long-term, more than a minute or two energy. Battery farms are to microscopically adjust the in and out of the electricity to do the job of the flywheel. That's what they're paid for. That's what they're paid for. And I'll go into more detail on that now. But there's a quick video just to get you into this. That's a small flywheel. I mean, we're talking about flywheels that are just gigantic, Well, because under the renewables, we don't have any flywheels built in, we don't have stability built in, we don't have the inertia in the system. We have to add the inertia by adding, in the first part, flywheels. And so Miliband proposes to build 100 of these flywheels. They're built under the pretext of balancing the grid, but really they're there just to keep the grid inertia stable and balance the frequency. Where we haven't got them built into the system before, you have to add them. But that's only part of this costly solution, because all of those flywheels are additional costs over and above traditional generation. Or I'll continue. I will just explain in very simple terms what the inertia in the national grid really is and how it works. Now, if you look at the back of any appliance, electrical appliance, you'll see the voltage, and then you'll see it's 50 hertz. That's how many cycles a second the electricity is coming at, 50 hertz. So how does that fit in to the 3000 RPM that these motors run at? And the answer is, it's very simple. It's 3000 revs per minute. Divide the 3000 by 60 and you get the revs per second, which is 50 hertz. That's where that comes from. And to do that, I'll use my hamster friend. That's popping up throughout this video so far. Just look at this hamster. The hamster's power is going to be driving this flywheel. That's what it is, a flywheel. And what you'll see is it get out of control. The hamster leave it, but the flywheel will continue to spin. It is the inertia in the flywheel that keeps it spinning. Now, the whole idea in the grid is to keep everything spinning at that 3000 RPM, not faster, not slower. And in this case, the hamster applied too much power. And what happened if you increase the energy and don't increase the demand with it, you will go out of control, just like that flywheel with the hamster. So too much power will increase the rotation, increase the speed, increase the frequency, and the system will fail. And the exact opposite can happen. Don't have enough energy going into the flywheel, say the hamster's going slower, will slow the flywheel turning down after the initial inertia is overcome, and therefore the frequency will drop and the system will fail.
Or your customer will, because if you don't import it, it's one of the things you can't import. If you start importing it, you're going to be into all sorts of things. Yeah, I mean, it's totally not tenable for you to import it. So that's that. And by the way, when I was doing that, I found out that hamsters are the only animal that stay in contact with the flywheel 100% of the time. They've always got feet on the flywheel, whereas other things don't. Mice don't, for example. I didn't know that before, right? So a battery farm is a mode, and a battery farm primarily supports grid frequency using frequency sensitive mode, and they pay them to do what's called FSM, or a limited sensitivity, which is there's different speeds, microseconds and things, to adjust it to keep it going. Or use the French connection. You can, in Isle of Man, is said, well, we can stabilise it, bring it in, so we'll always have connection to UK, so we can use that to mix in our grid. And in this case, if you got 1,000 megawatt wind farm, you'd need about 100 to 150 megawatts of flywheels or battery farm to do that. And by the way, I was really kind, Kirsten. I didn't put a fire on that battery farm. I just left it as a battery farm when I did that image. Okay? I could have put it on fire. Okay? So you're going to be connected to France. I think under any scenario, you're going to be connected to France. I think what Kirsty's saying is perfect. You've got to be connected to France. Right, questions at this point? I'll carry on because we've lost time, I think. Right, getting out to sea.
Question here, please.
Yep.
So I was just wondering, what are the Isle of Man going to do?
I wish I knew. I started off, when I arrived, Isle of Man, there's something really wrong. They've said their wind farm can produce 60-odd% what we call load factor, which is unlike any other farm ever created in the world. Yes? And I could not believe what I was entering. But when I entered it, only one of their, I think they had 20 or 25 members of parliament, of their parliament, only one voted against. I've now got 5 voting against. But the people in the Isle of Man now, the people are becoming educated about it. And so it isn't finalised. But without planning permission, without a final decision, they're taking away a lot of the environment. They're just steamrolling it. So there's a lot of anger growing. Okay, but they actually, funnily enough, have a big, not their wind farm, which is on shore. It's 3 or 4 wind turbines on shore, that's all. They've got one out to sea. And that one out to sea is a huge one. It's bigger than this. And it was for UK. And I'll go into that later. So, but that won't go ahead. I've done a whole video why that can't go ahead. Yes.
Sorry, could have checked myself. The maintenance offshore, are they higher? I don't know how much is expenditure on keeping these things in a like corrosive atmosphere.
Yeah, I'm coming to that details. You don't have to ask that. I cover it now. I'm going out to sea now. Okay. Right. That actually was a lucky shot because there was some mist or something, and someone managed to get a shot of a wind farm turning out at sea. And that effect can last 30 miles. And it can reduce the next wind farm's power. And you've got quite a lot in the way, actually, already. I'm not making you a great spot for this. It's called wind shadow. And I know one of your members of parliament, I can't remember, deputies, was asked about this and was told that's been covered. Well, no, it hasn't been covered. So anything within 30 miles on a calm day will have significant effect. It's causing a legal problem in the North Sea now. So the wind farm companies are suing each other in the North Sea on this, right? and it's not good for sailors either, because that's the sort of air disturbance you get if you're trying to sail anywhere downwind. And don't forget, this revolves 360 with the wind. So for up to 30 miles, you've got disturbed air. Not great for sailing, that's all. And I'm a sailor, you know. And by the way, if you take the wind, that bar chart at the corner there, wind can vary by 20% year to year. So your demand can go up or down by that factor just year to year. Right, this is the windrows for Jersey. And you can see most of your energy comes from the west. So it's this here. This is the big amount. This is it. This is against land here, you get next to nothing. But here, the west. Not even the southwest as you think. It's coming from the west. Okay? So I've now superimposed that on the wind farms. So there's your wind farm. I think, be right, is that this St. Bluick one I get wrong all the time? So that one there, and your lot are here, and this is where your wind's coming from. So I think you could have, and I don't know, I'd have to study this, I'd have to go a lot of work on it, which I can't do at the moment, but there could be a problem with wind shadow is all I'm saying. I'm not saying there is, right? But all I'm also saying is it's not a great spot. And this is about wind shadow, and explains about wind shadow, wind speed reduction, right? Okay. The claim yield is way too high at 43.3%. You have a lot less than the North Sea. The artificial intelligence, when I asked it how much you get out compared to the North Sea, and by the way, it's not intelligent artificial intelligence, so don't take too much weight by it. But my wife now tells me I've got someone to argue with all the time, which is good. So all I'm saying is you could have a serious effect. And so the question is, would they want this site? Now, what they do when they did the one off Isle of Man, they wanted the big one, nothing to do with the Isle of Man, it's for UK, is they paid a deposit. Now, in this case, it's to the king, because the Crown has made billions out of this, by the way. The Crown, and they pay an option fee, and they say, I want to reserve that, and the deal will be something like, yep, okay, give me 3 million and you can reserve it. How long? 5 years. And you've got to commit in 5 years and start. If you don't, it's a non-refundable deposit. That's how it works. So what a lot of the wind farms do is go round, get in the prime spots and pay in these deposits. Yes, that's what they do. I don't think anyone's been banging at your door. Yeah, but because there's far better places to make money, right?
Well, to be fair, we've heard that France has approached Jersey and said, we'd like to include you in it. So they're sort of knocking on the door. So we need to take that into account.
Yeah, that's fine. No, but I totally agree with that. I mean, what we're saying is you've got to have the customer. And everyone, I mean, you've agreed, without the customer, you've got nothing.
Yeah, so we're in agreement.
And that was fundamental, and I'm really pleased that we all agree on that.
Yeah.
Right. By the way, if you take the average cost price per kilowatt hour, industry, household, percentage solar, wind electricity, the more wind and solar you have everywhere in the world, the more cost is your electricity. So don't pretend, even if France do it, all it does is put up the cost of your electricity on the interconnector, because wind energy is extremely costly. Extremely costly. So is solar. I'll go on about that in a sec. By the way, don't follow the UK. That's the UK energy price, and that's the US. Yeah? We can't compete. Without cheap energy, you haven't got an economy. And even your touristic, everything. Without cheap energy, you haven't got it. And we have just ruined ourselves in the UK. Any questions at that point? Does everyone understand inertia now? Why they need to keep the flywheel spinning? And that it's two things. It's a balance of demand, and it's the frequency has to be kept. So there's lots of extra costs. But the other cost is this. When that solar comes in the middle of the day, let's take solar, gas has to get out the way. Now, even Ed Miliband, who's nuts, even Ed Miliband, no, he is, an absolute zealot, even he knows that you need gas as backup, because there's no other backup. So what they've said is all the gas stations have to stay open, right? But we're going to reduce how much we use that to 5% in the next 5 years, which is absurd, right? That's what he said. So what the trouble is, when that energy comes in, the gas has to get out the way. And in doing that, it says, okay, I'm going to go down to just standby. In standby, it uses 50% of the fuel, of the gas, that it does at full blast. So there's now, the solar's put a huge bill onto the gas. Huge. Or they use, there's two types of gas stations, there's closed circuit or open circuit. I'm doing it in very simple terms. An open circuit, it just burns the gas, gets electricity, and that's it. In the closed circuit, it takes the heat from that and recycles it in the turbo and things. Basically, that's the difference. One is much more efficient, but now we're paying inefficient ones to stay open because they can respond faster. So, and they are told, right, look, we're looking ahead 3 hours, let's do the deal. All right, please be on standby. We may never use you, but we're going to pay you. There's all sorts of extra operational costs because of wind and solar. And the reason is it's up and down. So, you know, it's like having a car. I drove here and it's 4 hours to Bristol Airport, and I got held up a lot on the motorway with 50 mile an hour zones outside to save CO2. I mean, I sat head to tail saving CO2 with everyone's exhaust, you know, here. And it's the same sort of silly thing.
I have a quick question, please.
Yep.
Is there any situation you can think of, or any circumstance where you think that wind or solar could play a part in an energy system?
Yes.
Okay, I think it'd be really useful for everyone to hear what that is.
All right, fine.
All the reasons
Well,
why.
I actually spent a fortune. I spent 20,000 quid on solar, and myself on a boat. I had to go. I went around the world on a catamaran with my wife.
For grid tide.
Well, yeah, all right. I went around the world, and I had to spend it because every bit of energy I could get out in the middle of the Pacific or the Atlantic, I needed. And so I had to pay for that. And I had the choice of wind, because wind actually was more effective for that. But I wasn't prepared to put up with the noise, so I got the extra solar. So there are situations, and there are isolated situations with homesteads and things where that can pay. Yes? Now, solar roughly in the UK, in broad terms, pays back in about 10 years if you have a battery. But you keep having to replace the battery every 10 or 12 years and so on, in broad terms. But that's it. So there are situations, specialist situations, where it makes sense. Okay? Now we're going to come to my most popular video this year, which I never thought would be, right? I thought it'd be the least popular. It's about the economics of the wind farm industry.
This mountain is a good representation of what's happened to the wind industry worldwide. You can go up the mountain and you come down the mountain, and that's exactly what's happened to the wind farm industry worldwide. Its share prices have collapsed. And somebody should tell Ed Miliband. This is the share graph price of Ørsted, the biggest wind farm business in the world. And this is Ed Miliband, our energy minister. And Ørsted seem to have blown a big hole in the plans of Ed Miliband already. But before we get to that, let's just take a wider look at the wind farm industry and what's happening to the share prices throughout the world. Here is the Ørsted share price for the last 5 years, and you can see it peaked in 2021, and then you can just see the gradual decline until here today. It's a drop of about 80% from its peak. That is a considerable drop. So here we are. Ørsted cuts investment plans and torpedoes Miliband's Clean Power 2030. Yes, it does. It's just got a big hole in its plans. Now, Ørsted actually had Hornsea 4 project awarded in the round 6 of the auctions. Round 7 doesn't look very good now, with people like this pulling out. But what's going on here? Well, let's look at Ørsted a bit more. What actions have they taken with this collapse in share prices? Well, after last year getting rid of their finance chap in charge of it all and getting rid of the operating manager in charge of it all, they've now got rid of the chief executive as well. But are they alone? Are they alone in this huge drop in shares, this 80% drop? Let's look wider than just Ørsted. Nordex are a wind turbine company, and they went with share price from there down to there. So very similar. They're in like collapse in terms of share price. Let's look at another one. And here we are, Global X Wind Energy. Same story. And of course, there is Vestas Wind Systems here. Just look at the collapse here. Nice slow decline, suddenly off a cliff, and then look at the net price we've got now. Well, that looks pretty devastating for the industry so far, but surely the Far East has got this right. Surely the Chinese companies in the wind industry have got this right. Well, let's take a look. No, it's still the same mountain shape. Share prices have collapsed everywhere in the industry. Ah, but hold on here, look at Equinor. Theirs is not a total collapse, theirs is very different. Yeah, it went to a peak around the 2021-22 period, especially in the 22 period when we had the Ukraine war, but it hasn't collapsed fully. And the reason for that, of course, is Equinor do both renewables and fossil fuel, and in fact have now merged with Shell. So they're basically buffered by the real world underneath, their pretend world wind energy, and they're buffered by the fact they have fossil fuel. Now at this point, I'm going to show you a secret, but you've got to promise not to tell anybody what I'm going to show you. You must not let this out, especially to our politicians and Ed Miliband. And it's here, this graph. Now this graph shows the growth of coal, oil and gas in the world. And the truth is, we're burning more oil, more coal and more gas than at any time in our history. In fact, all this green movement, I know you shouldn't tell people like Net Zero this, but we're burning more than we've ever burnt in history. Okay, so next bit. Right, Ørsted, the latest news, has gone down 17% since I did that. I had to add this at the hotel. It's gone down another 17% since I did that. Vestas, the Deutsche Bank, issued a warning, what's called a no-buy warning, that it's going down. Sorry to tell you this, but you're late to the party, right? And that's good news for you, by the way. You haven't gone in for the madness yet, okay? So you're late to the party. And even the big worldwide banks of green funds are now drying up and beginning to change. So don't think you've got a marvellous, attractive proposition. The world is changing under your feet. And by the way, France depends a lot on the next election, right? You must know that. So what is the idea today of doing all these glorious things may not be the idea tomorrow, and that's collapsing. But that, I've looked at more Chinese since, and they're all like that in total collapse. Share price in itself doesn't change the value. Share price is only one element in that. And actually the collapse is mainly because of what I'm going to show you in a minute. But it's other factors. The wind developer problem. The normal, and this is where I came to a point was made earlier. The normal business model is to develop a wind farm and sell it to a pension funds or investment funds, and that's how it's normal. So the developer who develops it sells it on because they haven't got the capital to keep spending billions. So they have to sell it on. The model now is to sell before you build, for example, to the Isle of Man or Channel Islands. If it was profitable, they would build and sell the business. But it's not profitable, so somebody has to carry the baby. In this case, it's the customer, France, because of its nuclear power. The cheapest electricity in Europe pays a large premium for wind energy, which is pure virtue signaling. It's producing its nuclear probably at about the 6-7p or something. It's producing, and it's paying 22.6p for the word I can't say, same Bruick I'll call it, right? So without the subsidies, wind farms are as dead as a parrot. Yeah? Oh, they are. They're as dead as that famous parrot, which is why wind farms can only be built alongside existing energy systems. In the UK, government plans to ensure we keep all our gas supply, that's not me, that's Ed Miliband, into the future, just like you would need to keep your French connection, right? But the trouble is now, you have all the new renewables and the existing, and then you have a duplicated distribution system which is causing uproar. We've just had a village in England block the developers. The villagers got together because of all these huge pylons going up, right? All that is extra cost, right? 12 billion a year on the grid in Britain alone because of renewables, which we don't need. 12 billion a year, that's 60 billion in 5 years. On top of that, the distribution system is impossible. Let me tell you this. The average home in Britain, the normal home, has a 60 amp fuse. That's it, right? And you can't put a heat pump in or anything. It's not possible. You'd have to put new distribution in. Every road, every substation, every driveway would have to be ripped up. You're talking of trillions. It's totally unworkable. I could go on for ages about that. And by the way, let's look now at some work. And I'm now coming to the real economics. Right, this is the degradation in performance. And this is not taken from any marvellous sort of remote source. This is taken from the accounts of the wind farm companies by a professor in Edinburgh,
and his name is Gordon Hughes. And his work in 21 was probably the biggest reason for that decline, because investors who were buying it have found that the length of life of the wind farm is very limited indeed, extremely limited. And I'm going to go into that now. So you can see the Denmark offshore, which is the blue one there, is 40% load factor to begin with, down to 15% year 10, right? So it's down to 15. So that's more than half is lost within 10 years, right? So there's more on this. Now this is from Gordon Hughes again. This is the time, take the top one, so take this one here. This is the time, by this year, by 20 months, 40% of the turbines have failed. And this goes on like this. So what is this really telling you? Well, what it's really telling you is that when wind energy, when the turbines pass the 2 megawatts, the old ones are 2 megawatts and below, they last quite a long time. But anything above that, you've had it. It just doesn't last. It's more like a sports car going around a racing circuit that needs to, every time you go into a pit stop, they change the tyres and refuel the car, and it goes on to the next part of the race. The higher wind turbines, the higher technology ones, don't last at sea. Full stop. The maintenance cost becomes so high that within 12 to 15 years, it's over. The cost of operating now is more than they're getting paid for the electricity, and it's abandonment time. And that is what the investors have learned. They were looking forward to 20, 25 years. No one, by the way, does 35. No one, right? That's like one of my famous Fools and Horses sketches was Trigger about his brush. And he said, I've got this brush for sweeping the streets and I've had it for 25 years, right? So he says, yes. And in that time I've only had 9 handles and 15 heads on it. Yeah. And the bloke sits to think, well, actually, that's not new. Yes, it is. I look after my brush. And a bit like this. And that's what that tells you. It's the Fools and Horses thing. That's what it is, right? Now, these are taken from the economic reports, from the actual financial reports of the wind companies themselves. And what's happened is the people who bought into it have been burned. And now, unless they can sell those models on, unless they can develop and sell the wind farm on, which is your earlier point, you're selling it on, they haven't got a business. It's beginning of the collapse. So I think the chances, I'm not a betting man normally, but I think the chances of any wind farm proposal I should go through this process, fine, is going to go ahead, is minimal, absolutely minimal. I already know that by agreeing on the escrow you've got to do to remove them at the end of time, that kills it anyway. I know that. So that's what you've got. You've got serious problems. And by the way, I'm willing to offer my time free if you want any critical analysis here of any government report to the government. If they're open to that criticism, then I'm happy to do it, and I'll do it free of charge. Okay? Just to tell you that. So there we are with that. And this is the operating cost increase with age. So Ed Miliband's found himself with wind farms now, which have come to the end of their life. The operating cost is higher than they're being paid. Do you know what the solution is? Money, more money, right? We hide it. We say to them, well, let's give you more money then. I know you agreed to it. I know you've been going 15 years, right? But let's give you more money. But that's nothing, because a lot of those weren't as big as they are today. And by the way, the 12 megawatt ones by Siemens led to the biggest corporation loss in world history. Right? The 12, you know about that probably. The 12 megawatt ones were total mess. Okay? So this is to do with operating costs increasing. So in just 12 years, the cost rose 12 to that. And by the way, the reference there is Professor Gordon Hughes from Edinburgh University. He presented all this in 2021, and the share prices everywhere collapsed. Now, that's only one factor. The other factor is interest rates. Interest rates for borrowing for the 4 billion used to be 1.5%, 2%, because we were printing money so much, interest rates were low. Yeah? But this is stopping, and it's now 4.5%, Bank of England, and that's where I costed anything on here. So there's a bit of a shock, isn't it, for the future? They're not going to be rushing to your door. But the emperor will keep on going. The emperor in the carriage will keep on going around. He's naked, right? But you've all got to believe he's clothed, okay? Because that's what we're in. Right. So the world span. Professor Gordon Hughes' analysis suggests that offshore wind projects initiated from 2017, maintenance costs could exceed guaranteed electricity prices from the 12th year of operation, highlighting a potential issue with long-term economics of these projects based on real accounts. Catch-22 is, well, lose the farm or increase the subsidy. It's a common sense when you think about it. Professor Hughes, a former professor of economics, University of Edinburgh, senior advisor on energy and environment to the World Bank. I appeal to evidence, not him, by the way. I don't ever appeal to just say he knows more, he knows more. That's meaningless, right? I appeal to his evidence. Right. Most offshore wind turbines are designed for a service life of about 20 years. And this is the fools and horses bit. And they do not make it that far, 12 to 15 years before operating costs exceed, as I've said. But not here. No, not here. You've declared 35 years. That's the sort of thing you know before you begin. Never mind feasibility. This 35-year claim means that whoever's advising that doesn't know what they're talking about. Right? Because that is a fools and horses broomstick on a massive scale. Right? And that has halved your costs. More than halved your costs. So that's a major cost fiddle. And I would, if the government, and I'm really pleased at what's been said today by your government representative, I am. But if they want a critical analysis to say, well, can it survive me? Or have I got a point? They can dismiss me. I'm offering that time free of charge. I can write a report, if they give me one, free of charge to say, no, this is why it's not, here's the evidence. I'd love them to do that and be open, right? Anyway, conclusion. While Siemens 8 megawatt offshore wind turbines in the UK engineered for a 25-year operational life, significant failures requiring major repairs are likely to occur much earlier. Based on industry strengths reliability data, Siemens Camercy has reported challenges. The average time before such a failure is 5 to 10 years. For precise figure, site-specific performance, blah, blah, blah. So that's a major blow to the viability of your project. Right? Questions? Were you surprised at any of those figures, Kirsten?
I'm not surprised by anything you said.
That's a cop-out.
Okay, I think most of your presentations have gone out.
Why? Tell me where you disagree.
No, because, as I said, it's very premature from my perspective.
Yeah, I understand that point.
We are doing this on evidence-based.
Yeah, okay. But
we will only go ahead if it economically makes sense.
Yeah, and it won't. Yeah, I know, so it won't go ahead. I'm just trying to...
So the rest of it, as far as I'm concerned, is...
I see. But it's interesting, surely.
Well, we're trying to get you some information so that when you're doing your evaluation, you have places to look. We're trying to help. Sorry, to say that this is rubbish isn't right. No, but the reason we're doing this and why we're bringing the other stuff forward is to help, hopefully help, you guys make better informed decisions. That's it. It's simple as that.
Oh, yeah.
No.
I'm not understanding.
Who wants to ask a question?
No.
I was just going to say, why is the main thing that Jersey's looking at the wind farms? I know they've said they've looked at other things, but the thing that seems to be out there, the main thing is wind farms.
Why don't we save that question till the end of this,
that's
so
right.
we can understand,
That's dealt
because
with
it may
later.
be that these other presentations
That's dealt
make
with
it
later.
obvious they shouldn't or they should. But let's look.
Ask for your evidence about the length of time that these turbines take before they need.
Yeah, the evidence comes from...
Where does the evidence come
I'm telling you now. Hold on. See here, Professor Gordon Hughes and his reports. And if you actually just Google Professor Gordon Hughes wind farms, right, that's his work. And it's based on the actual accounts of the wind farm companies and their operating costs and everything.
And that's on the on some website.
It's on lots of websites now. And if you wanted, if you gave me your email, I'll send you that report. Right? So it is the evidence. It's firm evidence. It came
let him
out,
finish.
and no one's challenged it because it's true. Because it's actually, the operating costs rise and rise and rise till it becomes uneconomic. And it's all part of the cult. And it's there. And so that's why it was so important. That's why I gave you where it's from, the source. Okay? Anything I do, I can give you the source. Anything I do. Right? Because that's I'm an engineer. I live in that world. This is not about CO2 today. This is not about the science. This is about the technology. That's what I do. I scope things and look at things, the technology. I was in charge of Wales for doing a number of things. I've sat on government quangos in the UK. Managed to do away with one. It really was great. But, so I've done all that, right? But that doesn't make me any better. It doesn't matter who I am. All that matters is evidence, nothing else.
Just checking it, the Renewable Energy Foundation that says here on Wikipedia is frequently criticised as being against wind farms. So, the Renewable Energy Foundation.
Yeah.
So it's just worth knowing as well.
Say it again.
No, that's not. No, I'm saying what Wikipedia.
No, but fair enough.
The Renewable Energy Foundation have criticised what?
No, the point is then it's an area to look at.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's interesting.
No. The Renewable Energy Foundation is a biased organisation promoting renewable energy. What they've got to do, and what they haven't done, by the way, is actually go in and say why Gordon Hughes is wrong, Professor Gordon Hughes, because he's got all the documents there, all the details. Yeah.
May I have a quick word?
Yeah.
A year ago, Equinor and Siemens actually had to withdraw from the north part of Scotland, floating wind farms, back to Norway again for maintenance, and the age of them was 6 years.
You're correct. I've done a detailed video on it. You're quite correct. So it was 6 years, and they were claiming a marvellous yield factor of 65%, by the way. And in actual fact, because it was out of action for more than a year then, they towed it away. Huge cost, but that at least was experimental floating. Floating is 3 times more than onshore. I'm running out of time.
We're running out of
Right.
No, I think you're wanting to shut him down. No, I'm not. Just a second.
Can I just
because I know time keeps running up. We've got enough time.
Okay, carry on.
If there's more, this is important. But Kirsten, all we're trying to do is to get you. I know you were saying. I heard your response to the speech, but if there's nothing else, but you got one area to look that you hadn't had before you came here, then our processes work.
Absolutely.
Simple
The only
as that.
message I have is that we are looking at it.
No, I understand. The
And
only
I would ask anyone, when we finally publish the paper, everyone should come forward with their questions. I've got no problem with that.
So here's just one other one. I think your approach.
We are so
look
very
at it.
early.
I support that, and you've heard me say that. There's something to think about: is how much money are you doing in the evaluation? I raise this for all of these station numbers. Just hear me out. How much money are you putting in to do the evaluation? And at what point do you realize, you know what, this is money not well spent. We already know what the answer is, and you can cut it back. So my suggestion is look hard, but watch how much money sunk is money sunk. But on a go-forward basis,
But so far, it's not much money sunk.
that's good news. At some point, you're going to have to look and say, you know what, it smells like a skunk. It is a skunk, if that's the case. So you don't. It's all our money you're spending, okay? It's all our money you're spending. Just consciously think about, as you go to these discussions, how much money is it going to cost you to get to an answer, and could that money be better spent? That's all. Because otherwise, you're doing absolutely the right thing.
From my perspective, Jersey needs economic growth. It needs it fast, and it needs it we need to find different industries. If this is one that can help us achieve that, and it is the economics adds up.
Sir, that's,
then
I agree you need money,
if
and we're
the
all for
economics
that.
doesn't add up, we don't want to go into something which is going to cost us money, because the whole exercise is to make money.
And that's fantastic.
You know,
No, we agree with that. Just a sec, Barbara, hold on, just a sec, Barbara.
I'm just
See, if he was able to stay, he would see the other ideas.
No, he's going to just a sec.
We're going to deal with that later.
Teresa, everybody's going to be able to see everything because we're taping it. So just because he's putting out time, very valuable time. That's why we're taping this. Okay, because so that he can look later and think about it, and maybe there's something else you learn, or maybe not. You know.
That's why I wanted to come.
I know.
Well, I think he has to be congratulated for coming, by the way.
I think so. Absolutely. No, I agree. Okay, now Barbara.
I think the thing is how much we're going to sell the seabed, and what's the clean. That's it.
That will,
It's got
that
nothing
will
to
be
do
addressed
with
in all this number.
what's going on between the company and France and whoever.
That's their problem.
What we're interested in, how much rent, and what's the clean, and
Absolutely.
And there's one other element to that, though, Barbara.
and the lawyers' costs.
What's the likelihood? Also, remember, you're putting money in. This is going to cost you to get it to the sale. What's the likelihood that actually somebody's going to show up and buy that land?
Correct.
No, because that's where you're investing.
No, it's worse than that. And I need to say something there. It's worse than that. You're trying to sell the seabed. I've got no problem with that. But then you're trying to get 200 million out of it, which is 5% of that 4 billion, by the way. Right? You're trying to get that every year out of it. The wind farm company, they want that. They want that to when they sell it on. They have to sell it on to be viable. And whoever buys that needs that income. You're double counting the income. It isn't there. The money is not there for you. Above the subsidy, above the subsidy of the above the rent of the city.
Let me jump in. You may not get everything you thought. No, I know. I agree with you.
Because we haven't finished
When you get your
study
bids,
yet, so we will.
like any land sale, I agree with you. And like any land sale in the oil business, you don't know until you know. And so you'll go to bid and you'll find out. What you need to look at is how much money is it going to cost us to get to the point where we're going for bid, and what's the likelihood that this is actually going to go there. And one way to do that is just look around the world and where else is all these bids happening.
That's what I've done.
No, I know, but I'm saying do you want to keep spending money in this on the hope that you might be able to lease it out for something that you don't know how much it'll be? Because fair enough, it'll be marketable, determined or not, that's all. Go ahead.
This is off topic, but if we're doing the best for Jersey, why are we doing this net zero, which is totally not?
That's another question.
I know
This
it's
has got
not. You were saying
Nothing
it's
to
best
do with
for
this.
Jersey.
No, I
This has got
understand
nothing
that.
to do with climate change.
No,
We're
but you did
trying to
say
avoid
you're doing
that.
the best for Jersey, and you said about the economics of older generation. Well, that's effectively getting immigration is a pyramid scheme. That's actually illegal in the private sector. It's a Ponzi scheme.
Okay, so just a sec. Let's not go
That's
to
separate.
I'm passionate.
I know it's off topic, but I have to comment. I can't let
You wanted to get it
that
going.
go by
Okay, you had
because
it
that
going.
is totally anachronical, and it's
That's another whole divide.
Exactly.
By the way, at the end of this conference, I was going to say that the next thing we'll be talking about, that I've already presented once, is the whole concept of net zero. And it's not that we don't make any difference or the economics for Jersey are ridiculous, but I want to talk about the fundamental science behind the premise to start with.
Do you have a question?
But that's another story. It'll be another day, and we'll have our day in court there. That's just
There's a gentleman there with a question.
okay.
Deputy, could I just understand clearly, is there a clear commitment from the government that the wind farm project will not go ahead unless escrow funds are deposited? Number one.
I can't make that commitment here today because I don't know the final outcome of this report. Let us wait for this report. The report itself, all I can say is the report, as I understand it, will be dealing with the cleanup side of it. So that should be in there. But I cannot say one way or another until we know what comes out of this report. And we're literally 2 months into compiling it. It'll be another 2 or 3 months before it's finished.
But can't you take out...
Because we are not in...
Let me finish.
When you say the government, okay, I cannot make a commitment for the government just stood here in my anorak at the sausage area, okay? The only commitment I can make is that this has to be an economically viable project. It has to.
Yes.
It has to stand up on its own 2 feet economically.
And I agree.
It's about making money for Jersey, and that's in the round the whole of the project. And if I see that it is like going to be economically viable, then I will not be behind it. That's the commitment I can.
I think the other concern, though, that we're hearing is that as you do that report, the people are saying, some of the people at least, and I'm sure all of them would say, they would want to make sure that anything that gets put in place has money put inside so you don't get stuck with the cleanup. I think that's
sense to me.
And yet that was your opinion, wasn't it? Which is fine. No, it wasn't a law.
I believe this.
Whatever the report says, just take into account that the people are saying, not in our back.
There was a second part to the question. I think you'll have felt from the public today there is a general sentiment of why are we spending so much money on something that we can derive external evidence for that the product is unviable, and therefore any customer for that product is likely to require some kind of government subsidy, and there's no real industrial logic on it. So I suppose the question is, and you'll have felt the sentiment today, is are we going to have full and open publication of the costs of this undertaking?
Yeah, because the costs aren't much. Again,
okay. Well, I think that would satisfy
you know, I worry about this item, okay? Because I worry really strongly that many people in this room will say we need to diversify the economy, we need to grow the economy, because we do. And then the moment we try to do that, people in this room say, oh, you're getting it wrong, you're doing it wrong, you're doing it the wrong way. I'm saying we have to study these things. We have to, it's life. You have to make a choice, right? We have chosen, we're going to explore wind farm.
This is a bit like having a factory you can rent out. So you go along and you say, anyone interested in renting my factory? Instead of a seabed, it's a factory. And then saying, oh, we want a share of, we want some of your profits out of the business you make, not rent for the factory. No, we want to actually partake in what you're doing in that factory. And the answer would be no. We just want to rent the factory. We just want to rent the seabed. And this is the fundamental error. And they're probably going to waste a lot of money now on people who don't know what they're doing, and that's already evident from the initial report, with claims like 35-year life and a 6 pence per kilowatt hour, cost when even the interest charges are 5 pence. It's evident from the report they don't know what they're doing. But what is wrong is that you can't take the profits away, and the business got nothing to do with you. You're the landlord, you rent it out, that's it. And who puts the money in for all the machines and that business is the business owner. That's the wind farm developer. And that's the simplest way of looking at this.
We are now doing that exploration. That does cost some money, not massive amounts of money, it costs some money. But you have to do it. We could have chosen nuclear, we could have chosen solar, we could have chosen tidal, whatever. We would still have to do this study and pay for it, okay? That has to be done.
That is actually not true. Just like with the factory analogy I've given you, that would be the business in the factory doing that study. That would be the wind farm developer doing that work and establishing how profitable it is. That is something you do not have to do. So I totally disagree.
And so I've got no problem with the costs of this being published, that's fine. But they will not be some multi-million-pound endeavour that you likely think they are. But if we don't do these things, Jersey cannot diversify its economy. Jersey cannot get the economic growth. We have to understand the reality of the world we live in. You need to pay for absolute studies to make sure you make the right decision.
I think there's a fear on the island that there's a commitment to an offshore.
No, my fear is that we have an island that won't accept economic growth. It's absolutely vital to pay for the ageing population.
I totally understand that fear, and that is why I've made a separate video after I left this conference. I made a separate video advocating a particular path for the island that could actually offer it a really good income and future. I'll put the link to that in the description below this video.
That's what really, really worries me. Because in order to get that economic growth, we can't do a hospital to bulk. But what we need to do is be prepared to fail fast. And fail fast means do the research. If it doesn't add up as an economic proposition, you cross it off and say, we're not doing that, move on to the next thing, let's see what else we're doing.
That's logical,
so that's
rational.
What you need to be
But that's
rational.
I think we all agree with that. And,
yeah, we do.
No, and the fact you've come and spent the time to talk to us and raise that, and hopefully you get that study done as fast as possible.
That's what we hope to do. You have to look at things.
So that's
don't look at
my concern, my only concern on that is such ridiculous figures like 35-year lifespans have been put forward that I can't believe the advice you've been getting is even rational.
That was a high-level internal piece of work.
It's done. Okay.
I am sorry, sir. You have come from afar to tell us that all the things we've got wrong, and I've tried to put it in context for you and say that first piece of work was a very high-level piece of work done internally just to see if it was worth looking further. We said, yes, it's worth looking further. We're taking that one next
at low cost. No, fair enough. You got, not everything the government does is going to work. To be fair,
your fundamental approach is spot on. Right, about the economics. Spot on. And I know this isn't economically viable, I know that. So I know it's not going to happen actually.
Which is fine.
Because with your rationale, this won't happen.
That's fine.
But I'm prepared for that to be the outcome.
But the approach, just to be clear, the approach the government's taking is let's look at a logical, rational approch, let's do a test. Hopefully you keep the costs down and reach out to do it.
Do that piece of work.
Fair enough.
Otherwise,
that internal piece of research, has that been carried out by Mark Latham?
That's a specific question.
I don't believe it was. I don't think so. It was done by our internal economics team, I believe.
That's fine. I don't have an issue with Dr. Latham per se. I'm sure he's very sincere in his views. But he has been an advisor to the government, according to a JP piece, for about the last 10 years. He is, I don't know if he's the chief exec or whatever he is, of Dyna Energy, is it? whatever. So
A wind farm company.
which is a wind farm company.
He's an oil man. He's an oil man.
And
No, just here. Let her finish. Let her finish. Let her finish her statement, please.
I'm not
Let her
suggesting
finish her
anything
statement, please.
negative, but what I am saying is that if that analysis has come via that route, then I know we might have to spend a bit more money. But shouldn't there be an analysis of the analysis? Can we just take? No, I'm sorry. If it is coming from a wind farm source, if that analysis is coming from some wind farm source, how can that be? It just
If an anti-wind farm analysis is coming from the oil industry,
Well, then
why
you-
would you
but-
take that as a thing?
Well, and the reality is you wouldn't. You would look at
The point
alternative
is-
views. That's all.
Yes.
Another
That's
thing
simple
Jersey
as that.
does is Jersey gets very personal very quickly. So you're attacking the man, you're not attacking the work.
No, no.
And so I would say, I cannot tell you how much Mark was or wasn't involved in that piece of work. I don't
No,
really
we
care
deserve to
how
know.
much he was or wasn't
But
involved in that
I
piece of
care
work.
because
My chief economist has sat there and he said, this piece of work, I believe that it was his team that did that piece of work. And he said, this is, he stood behind that piece of work. He said at the outset, he said publicly, very, very high level, very, basically to minimize all costs and to just do a piece of work to see, is it worth moving forward?
Well, if you can't answer, I think freedom of
That's where
information,
we
though,
are.
you can make that
There's
request.
no conspiracy. There is no conspiracy. GB News might make you want to think there's some big conspiracy around this. This isn't it, okay? We are just trying to make sure that Jersey looks at proper opportunities for economic development. If not, we can't pay for your pensions and your healthcare.
So that part, we're 100% behind that aspect.
I really do.
That's not
Yeah,
a problem.
but I'm not sure people really get how important, how much.
Oh,
how
I
much,
think we. And by the way, we will.
the health sector is costing this island right now. And
Sorry,
how
just
much we don't-
okay. We're going to have to stop for a coffee break.
Yeah,
but my last message I'd like to make, and then you'll have the final say.
Okay.
We would like to help you with that. We're absolutely. We'll get just like we volunteer our time to raise this one. We've got other, and these are industry people, and absolutely we'd like to help. So call us out. I've stopped from the PAC because I can't talk to you guys if I was in the PAC, so I had to step down. But the last 4 years of my life, I've been trying to help. So there are people, and there's others, because your initiative of how do we get income and how do we do this, absolutely
That's what this is
support.
all
Okay, now before we break, one last statement, and let's have
The way
coffee
I
break.
see it,
Well,
if Europe wants renewable energy, if we can supply it, why wouldn't we? But if we can't supply it, it's not economically viable, then we can't. But if we can, why wouldn't we?
Simply because you're not the one who's going to be supplying it. This is fundamentally flawed because you do not understand that simple point. It would be the wind farm developer and whoever they sell that business onto that'd be supplying it, not you. It is the landlord renting the factory out, not the landlord running the business.
The sooner you get there with them, the faster
Okay.
you'll find out.
How can I quickly
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Can I quickly whip through the end of the talk? I'll do it in less than 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we got.
Unbelievably, in the UK, when we have a solar or wind farm, it's deemed to be strategic. And because it's strategic, it doesn't need environmental studies. I know that's incredible, but that is the fact. But if you're sensible, you will look at the environment. The environment matters. And here are the 6 points I would quickly like to highlight, obviously without going into depth, but just highlight each of them. Here in the North Sea, just off Holland, 90% reduction in diving seabird populations, and in another place nearby, 99%. Wind farms vibrate all the time, sending long-distance sounds out from the wind farm for miles and miles, and this can affect all sorts of marine life, including fish, of course. It's an area that needs a lot more research. In the north of the UK, the fishermen are blaming the recent wind farm installation on the decline in salmon stocks. The truth is, we don't know. So the question is, are you willing to take a risk on blighting an entire area, not just where the wind farm is, but for miles away from the wind farm? Wind turbines turn at speeds approaching 200 miles an hour at their tip, and the wear on them is considerable. The leading edge whirs and sheds microplastics, and these end up in the sea. In fact, they can end up on land ones, they can end up over 100 kilometres away because they're carried into the wind. They are invisible, but they do pollute the ground and they do pollute the sea. There's a lot more work that needs to be done on this. The very low frequency infrasound from wind farms can really disturb people when it resonates with their building, for example. But this only applies up to about 5 miles. So in this case, with the offshore wind, you're normally further than 5 miles away and you have no buildings there. So I don't see any real problem for that. It's a problem for onshore, but not for offshore wind. And number 5 is boats and fishing. Obviously small boats like sailing yachts and that. Well, sailing you really can't do in a wind farm. There's too much there's too much turbulence. And at night, if you haven't got radar, it can be a problem because you may plough into one. But maybe that's a small problem, I'm not sure. But it certainly does restrict what you do. It's a no-sail area. And of course, larger boats, commercial boats, can't go there because they're too high for the minimum height of the rotor. So you've got those problems. And basically, it's a no-go area for boats, for lots of boats. Now, on top of that, the fishing, you can't trawl in between, so it is a no fishing area. And that has to be allowed for, of course. And the last one is the cleanup, the environmental cleanup after the end of life. And the end of life for offshore wind is not that long. It actually is much shorter than people think. And you really should put a contingency sum aside so that by the time end of life comes, you've got the money to take away all that surface structure that you can see and the underneath structure in the sea. And the cost of that is probably almost the same as building the wind farm in the first place. If you leave the undersea obstructions, then you've got hundreds of acres of places you can't fish again because you're going to snag all the nets and so on. So you've really got to allow for that cleanup. And from what I've studied, from what I've seen, this is not being allowed for. There is no way to safely dispose of wind turbine blades except by burying them. And so you have to consider where you're going to bury this huge amount of huge wind turbine blades. They're made of glass fibre and they can't just be left to deteriorate and contaminate the seas. My guess is, and it's only a guess, that Jersey and the Channel Islands in general don't have that sort of spare land to be doing this. So here I've just quickly gone over some of the subjects to do with the environmental impacts of wind farms. So, and that's it. So you've got 45 square miles, same size as your island, to clean up. So someone might be holding the baby, and you've got to clean up above and below the water. There's a shop below the water. You can't leave that for all the nets and everything to tangle in. A lot of money. Why it's a cult is dead simple. If you plot every single conference, every single COP conference and everything on the growth of CO2, they make no difference at all. In Britain today, all our solar and wind, all of our renewable solar and wind is less than 5% of our total energy. We are fooling ourselves. It's the emperor's clothes. What all the countries are doing doesn't stop that growth, makes no difference whatsoever. Sorry. Got out of water. So the Energy Secretary is coming here, 27th of May, and I'm just going to tell you these. I think it's a rubber stamping exercise. It's impossible to decarbonise and remain a viable economy. Fact. There's no need for Jersey to decarbonise. Fact. No costing or cost-benefits analysis. Just join the groupthink. Respect the democratic process. Do the people actually want this? Thank you. Even an attempt to decarbonise will make Jersey poorer. This rubber stamping event is blind to opposing views. It's a groupthink cult. It has given one external consultant, was after 1.3 million contract, a privileged position. I don't like that. That should have gone out wider. And to date, I was told 21 million has been spent, but I'm not sure about that, but you'll see. So that's it. That's it. I'm sorry. The cost of cleaning up, totally ignored. The cost of interest and the loan, ignored. Yields overstated. The cost of short notice connected backup pricing, ignored. Cost state per kilowatt, untrue. Assumed lifetime, wrong. Capital cost, ignored. Constraint costs, ignored. Inertia costs, ignored. Additional connector costs, ignored. And
this is the point at the end. I challenge anyone to debate me, any wind farm, using evidence to debate me. And you can't allow any politician, and he hasn't done that, I don't think. You can't allow any politician to close themselves off, but most of them will. And the best solution is to stay with what you have, and the second best is diesel generators. I'm not going to go into that, but that is as simple, right? And if you want a bargaining position, your only bargaining position is to redo the diesel generator. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, so there we are. I'd just like to point a few things out. The part where I presented the economics of the wind farm industry, which are based on the share collapse. Now, share collapse, the share price dictates what the expected profit is. So if you've collapsed by 80%, you've lost the profitability forecast based on that. So your profit forecasts have totally collapsed. And this is the case not just for European big companies like Ørsted, no, not just for them, and not just for Vestas, who've had the shares deemed as, don't buy them, don't buy thing by some banks. And not just that, but you've also had Chinese turbine companies collapse, as it were. And there's a reason for this. The forecast in the industry is not good because the whole wind farm development is very simple. You build the wind farm and then you sell it to some people who think they've got a long-term, nice guaranteed income, investment funds, pension funds, things like this. That's collapsed. And why that's collapsed is because the profits aren't there. And they're not there because the length of life is a fabrication. And that is what a Professor Hughes from Edinburgh exposed. But rather than deal with the evidence he's just given of the share collapse, I mean, that's a fact. Anyone can go on and check the shares of those companies. And rather than deal with that, the minister Googles, Renewables, so they don't like this sort of thing. And the Renewable Energy Foundation, a rather biased organisation. But they didn't actually able to give any counter evidence. Don't forget, Professor Hughes' evidence was based on actual accounts. It wasn't a theoretical model. It was based on the actual accounts, the operating costs of continuing these wind farms going. And why, if it wasn't true, why would the share price have collapsed? If it was profitable to carry on with these wind farms, the share prices wouldn't have collapsed, would they? People would be eager to buy the wind farms off people. Now, I can say now, I'm absolutely certain, as anyone can be, that this wind farm proposal is not going to go ahead. But what's going to happen is they're going to waste the time, instead of getting into other plans like proposed in the video below, which is a one I did after this particular video, trying to put a suggestion forward to them. Rather than do things like that, which have got a positive, I'm not saying it'll happen, but they're a really positive thing to look at because they can offer the tax relief, they can offer all sorts of things to a proposal I put below. Rather than do that, no, they're going to waste all their energy on this. And actually, Guernsey has just committed, the sister island, has just committed 1.3 million to the local expert to take them further in this. It's like lambs being led to the slaughter to watch it. And so I had to, in my talk, cover both the idea of the wind coming on island and being super cheap, and I had to cover it also, going to France, because you're building something 6 times bigger than what you need. And, the analogy of it's a factory. You own the factory like you own the seabed, and you get a business to come who's going to spend $4 billion on its own business, and you're wanting the profits from that. No. So there's a double counting going on, and that double counting is the problem right at the bottom of this. And no matter what I do, I will not get through that cult-like thing, right? And it's all based on the net zero. It's all based on this. We've got to drive this forward. And I'm now doing a video on Spain because there's a lot more stories behind what's happened in Spain. But prior to that, and in many other videos, I've talked about the inertia problem. And there's quite a backstory to Spain that hasn't been sort of openly revealed yet. And I'm doing a video on that. So there we are, the madness grows and the money waste grows. And so the videos I've got coming out now, so I've got one on the recent appearance I did on GB News in the evening, actually, this time, on the idea of spraying in the skies. And by the way, Anyone who thinks that now all these commercial airplanes are spraying and all this nonsense, that is nonsense. It's nonsense. I won't even waste my brain time on it, right? But what is not nonsense is the government might want to do something like it, and that has to be opposed. But I'll be doing a video on that because it's, in engineering terms, absurd.